So good morning to everyone on this lovely sunny Wednesday morning. My name's Sarah Healy-Pearce and I'm a director in our business advisory team, and I'm really pleased to welcome you to our the next instalment of our Advisor Live webinar. Before we jump into it, a couple of housekeeping points. We've muted microphones. If we've missed yours, could I ask you to mute your microphone? We've got almost 30 people on the call this morning, so the idea of that is to try and cut down on background noise. Yes, if you could keep your microphone muted, that would be great. Thank you. We're all getting used to new ways of working, so please bear with us or with me actually, if the IT doesn't work quite as it should. I hope you'll be kind. And the last point is we want these webinars to be as collaborative as possible, so we want to have questions from you. But if I could ask you, you should be able to see a chat box on the right hand side of your screen. So if I could ask you to type in any questions that you may have or that may occur to you as we go through the next 30 minutes, then my colleague Luke Morris, who's our corporate finance partner, he's with us online and he's going to try and answer your questions as we go through. If we don't get round to your question, or if maybe it needs a bit more research, then we will come back to you, hopefully by the end of the day, but if not, certainly tomorrow, and we will send around a list of all the questions that were asked and the answers after the webinar as well. So yeah, please use the chat box on the right hand side. So just a little bit about our Advisor Live series of webinars. Some of you will be aware of the fact that we have a printed version of our Advisor magazine that comes out quarterly. But when the current situation occurred that we find ourselves in, we decided to try and do some regular webinars to keep our clients and other people up to date about what's going on, and hence Advisor Live was born, I guess. We want it to be something between a webinar, a podcast and a training session, and we're trying to we will cover hopefully topical subjects that are relevant at the moment. It's designed to be as short and sweet as possible, hopefully weekly at least. If events change quickly, as they did sort of middle of March time, then we might do them a bit more regularly than weekly, but it will be dependent on there being something to talk about. They will be 30 minutes. I'll cut myself off if I talk too much, but yes, they're designed to be short and sharp and not take up too much of your time, and most importantly, they're designed to be collaborative, so we want you to ask questions and get involved if possible. So we hope you enjoy them, and we hope that you find them relevant and interesting to you. So today's talk is about cash management, particularly in moments of crisis or change really that we find ourselves in at the moment. And I'm going to talk a little bit first of all about the timeline of what's happened, because when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, it occurred to me that things have changed massively in the last month, and that all businesses are dealing with lots of change within their own business that's happened so quickly. So I want to just remind us of that timeline really. And then managing cash is really about working out where you are now, what you're going to need in the future, and then deciding how you're going to meet those requirements by using either external financing, like the measures that have been brought in by the government. And I'm also going to talk about a little bit of internal cash management that you can do. So things that you can do within your own businesses to try and preserve effectively the cash position now, and hopefully mean that you're in a good position when lockdown finishes and demand increases at whatever point in the future that might be. So the timeline. I mean, it feels like I've been working at home for months and months and months. And when I look back, it's actually only been 2 or 3 weeks, and things have changed so much in the last week. So January time was our first hint of trouble, really, I think, with cases in China were starting to escalate quite seriously, but they hadn't really spread to Europe at that point in time. And I don't think anyone had really thought about the impact on businesses and clients. Then towards the middle and late February, we started to see more cases in the UK. And we started to talk about things being a bit more serious than we'd expected. But I think it was really the week of the 16th of March, so only 3 weeks ago, where things changed and escalated very quickly. So in that week, we had recommendations to work from home from the government and avoid social situations right at the beginning of the week. And then we had financial packages, significant financial packages, introduced by the Chancellor the very next day on the 17th of March. But then by the 20th of March, the Prime Minister was actually shutting down any social gathering areas, so pubs, restaurants, gyms, that kind of thing. And the job retention scheme was introduced, which, I mean, I've never seen anything like that in my career to help businesses. So that's unprecedented, really, in my career for help from the government. And then the 23rd of March, we had effectively complete lockdown. So in that period, things have changed enormously, and it's had a catastrophic effect on lots of businesses, but also others have been able to take advantage of opportunities. But I think what that shows is the fact that all businesses have had to address their cash situation very quickly as demand has dried up or capacity's changed. So what we're going to talk about today is really important for all businesses. So the first thing to do, I think, when you're faced with a situation like this, is to get some forecasts together. You need to know what your cash requirements are going to be, and you know, unfortunately, at the moment, there are lots and lots of unknowns, but you need to try and build various scenarios to cope with those unknowns. So you need to start with what you do know, so the cash you have in the bank, the money you're owed by your customers, and the money you owe your suppliers to start with, and then work out what's going to happen to that cash balance over time. And think about things like if demand reduces for your products or your services, you know, how you're going to cope with that. If you start to have issues with your supply chain, so your suppliers can't get products to you, or you need to find an alternative supplier. Capacity issues with staff is a big issue for people at the moment, with staff self-isolating or actually being off sick. You know, how are you going to manage that and meet demands from customers? But I think probably the biggest unknown that people are talking about is just not knowing when this is going to end. So your forecasts need to look at 3 months, 6 months, 12 months down the line, and try and predict what you think the picture's going to be. And that's, you know, once you know or have an idea of what you think is going to happen to your cash balance, you can then start managing it effectively. And once you've got those forecasts in place, I think it's really important not to just put them in the top drawer and forget about them, you know, tick though I've done my forecasting box. It's really important to keep those as a working document, and as things change, so plot your actual cash balance into it each day or week or however often you're revisiting it, and change those forecasts over time as new things happen and developments occur, because that's how you're going to keep a handle on your cash balance, on your cash requirements, but also your pinch points in the future. So when you know you're going to have to shell out a large sum, you're only going to be able to keep a handle on that if you're constantly reviewing those forecasts and making sure that they are completely up to date. So I think that's the first thing that's really important in the current climate. The second thing is that once you know what your cash requirements are, the next thing to think about is how you're going to meet those and whether you're going to meet those externally or internally. And I would suggest that it's going to be a combination of the two. From an external point of view, we're all hopefully aware of the various measures that the government have introduced. And I don't want to I'm not going to go through those in any sort of detail today because we've got future webinars planned on those subjects, and there's a lot more to say about them than I can cover in this session. But there are various measures that will help some businesses. Not all of them are relevant to every business, but there's lots of help out there. So for example, you've got various grants that have been introduced for small businesses and businesses in certain industries. There's the VAT and income tax deferral schemes where you can defer tax liabilities without having to apply to the revenue to do that. And then you've also got the schemes where you can ring the coronavirus helpline, the revenue helpline, and set up instalment plans for other types of tax, being PAYE and corporation tax. You've also got the job retention scheme, which is a big one at the moment that businesses are looking at, where they're looking at spare capacity within their business and using that scheme to furlough employees and get grants back. I think the important thing to say, using those measures, they're all about, or most of them, the government measures are about retaining cash and keeping cash in the business now. Some of them are grants and don't need to be repaid, like the job retention scheme. But some of them are simply deferring liabilities. So whilst it helps now, you do need to think about how you're going to repay those in the future. Most of them, the VAT deferral, at the moment they're saying would need to be repaid by the end of March next year, and the income tax is by the end of January next year. That may well be extended, but it may not. So you need to factor in being able to repay that. And again, it brings me back to forecasting and the importance of building in the future cash requirements. The other source of external financing that I just want to touch on is your bank or other lenders. And it's really important to keep an open dialogue with your existing bank in particular, but other lenders as well maybe. So talk to them about existing facilities you've got and whether you've got headroom in overdrafts or invoice discounting and things like that. Approach them, you can think about if you new lending and if you need a bank loan to see you through, then it's obviously important to talk to them. And also have a look at the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme, which is the scheme that the government have introduced a couple of weeks ago, which is a government-backed lending scheme to try and encourage the banks to lend money to businesses that need it. Now, at the moment, the terms were changed slightly last week, as the banks weren't lending huge amounts of money under that scheme. But we're hoping that with the change in the requirements slightly, we'll start to see cash coming through on those. But it's certainly something to investigate. The advantage with using that scheme is that it's a government-backed loan, so businesses that maybe don't have the security for traditional lending, the government will secure a percentage of the amount you borrow, so it's more attractive for banks. It's also interest-free, or in fact the government pay the interest for the first 12 months. So again, it's all about preserving your cash flow now and trying to help businesses through. We will be doing a webinar on that scheme separately, so I'm not going to talk about that in any more detail, but again, to labour the point, I suspect if you go to your bank, the first thing they're going to talk to you about is whether you have any forecasts or business plans in place. So I can't stress the importance of doing that enough, really. So that's the sort of external things that you can be thinking about now to help with your cash position. So I do just want to talk very briefly about internal cash management and how you can organise things within your business to try and keep the cash flowing around, really. So the first thing that you would need to review, really, or to keep an eye on, is your working capital. So that's your stock, your debtors, your creditors, and it's important to try and release cash where you can within that cycle. So from a stock point of view, the obvious answer is to try and convert your stock levels to cash wherever you can, which I fully appreciate is really difficult in businesses where demand has dropped. But if there are ways that you can try and reduce your stock levels and turn that into cash, that's obviously a priority at the moment. But also have a think about what you might need in the future and what stock levels you might need and where those are going to come from. So think about your supply chain and whether there are any issues within that, so key suppliers that you need to keep on side, and also about what's going to happen when we all come out of lockdown, and are you going to be able to have enough cash within the business to buy the stock or the parts or whatever it is that you need to mean that you can meet that demand in the future. It's all about making sure that the cash is being used in the best place. From a debtor's point of view, I guess this is probably the easier one to talk about, in that it's about keeping the cash moving around the cycle. So when you're invoicing your customers or your clients, try and invoice promptly and accurately so that they don't have any reason to query an invoice and delay a payment. And I often tell clients to be a nuisance, and I don't mean make yourself so much of a nuisance that they stop dealing with you altogether, but if you are regularly chasing the money that's owed to you, if your customers get a pot of cash, then chances are they might pay you to get you off their back rather than pay somebody who they're not talking to at all. So whilst I would be very careful about being a nuisance, I hope you sort of get what I'm talking about. I think the other thing is to just keep an eye on your debtors and be aware of change in payment patterns. And by that, I mean, if you have a customer that you know at the 15th of the month, you're going to receive the money from them. If suddenly one month it gets to the 20th and you've not had that cash, that could be a sign of trouble in their business. And there's a risk then that you won't receive that money. So be on top of that. If payment patterns change, get in contact with your customers as soon as possible and try and collect that cash, because you want it in your bank account as soon as possible. The next element of working capital is your creditors, and I approach this with caution, really. An easy way of keeping cash in your business is by not paying anyone. But I would not recommend that. I think you have to be very, very careful about that because it does carry reputational risk, and there are risks of action being taken against you in the future if you just stop paying people. I think it's also a big flag to your customers that there's something, to your suppliers, sorry, that there's something going on in your business, which clearly you don't want people to start thinking that. So just be very careful about not paying people. But perhaps if cash is tight, think about those suppliers that are really critical to your business and try and prioritize those. So maybe suppliers of raw materials or services that you really need, prioritize those and contact others and set up payment plans, things like that. So just, there are ways of doing it, but I would advise caution on just not paying people altogether. Assets is an interesting one. So by that I really mean capital expenditure, and I think when I started thinking about this, my initial reaction was look at your capital expenditure and don't spend any money unless it's absolutely critical and you need to do it. But actually, the more I thought about it, whilst that is true, and if you're really struggling for cash, then it's better to have the cash within the business and not buy that new van or that new piece of machinery. I think it's also worth bearing in mind that it's probably a fairly good time to buy that van or that piece of machinery if you can afford it. I would imagine there are some pretty good deals around. I would imagine there are some pretty good financing deals around as well. So again, it's all about cash management and looking at future requirements, but it might actually be quite a good time to look at buying something if you know you're going to need it, especially if you know your business is going to need it once demand picks up again. I think the other obvious area that people jump to straight away is reviewing their costs. We've already touched on looking at variable costs like staff and raw materials and utilising spare capacity, and maybe talking to your advisor about how you use the furloughing scheme to release a bit of cash in the system and utilise spare capacity around the business. But it's also a really good time to review your overheads, and you may well be doing that as part of the forecasting exercise, going through each of your overheads and looking at those that you can maybe afford to delay for a bit. So I don't know, vehicle servicing or things like that. So yeah, you can either delay them or maybe renegotiate terms with certain suppliers of things. So it's a good opportunity to do that. Again, a small note of caution, just if you are thinking about cutting costs, then a marketing cost is one that you just want to be a little bit careful of. It's an obvious one for people in the current situation where demand has dropped considerably. Then marketing costs are sometimes one that people think there's no point worrying about that, but just have a think about your products and your service and how you reach your market with that. It's really important in times like this where that you can project a business as usual, because you want people to come to you and not your competitors. So if you need to spend a bit of money on doing that, it might be a wise investment. So just be a little bit careful of that. And I think the last thing I wanted to talk about relating to cash and cash requirements is opportunities. I wanted to try and finish on a positive note. There's a lot of doom and gloom around at the moment. But actually, for some businesses, not all, I appreciate that, but for some businesses, there will be and there are opportunities which you need to consider when you're thinking about managing your cash position. So can you look at new markets for your product? Can you look at doing new products to existing markets? I think the news, we've all seen news of engineering businesses that have been supplying ventilators and brewing businesses that have been doing hand sanitizer, and they've taken grip of opportunities that are available to them, and if you are able to do that, you can build that into your cash flows. So that's really the main things that I wanted to touch on. The themes, if you could take away two things from what I've talked about today, I think the first one is knowing what you need over the next few months is going to be absolutely crucial to then work out how you're going to get there. So that's the first thing to remember. The second thing is to communicate with people. Talk to your accountants, if you need help with forecasting, talk to someone who can help you, talk to your customers to keep that money rolling in, talk to your suppliers if you need some payment terms, or if you want to make sure that your supply chain is going to carry on, talk to your banks. I think that's one of the most important things to remember as well, and revisit those forecasts regularly. So it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, I'm afraid. I'm conscious of the time. I hope it's been useful for you. We are doing, as I said earlier, we're doing regular webinars on various different topics. We're also keeping our website and our various social media channels up to date, and all the details are on the screen. So keep an eye out. We will update you of any new developments as they affect our clients. And I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been useful. If you've got any further questions, I haven't been keeping an eye on the screen, so I hope Luke's been doing a good job on that. If you've got any further questions, then please use the contacts that are on the screen now, the email address, the telephone number, and we will come back to you as soon as we can. Thank you very much, everyone.